David Hertel with you. A major story broke last weekend. It was broke by an international consortium of investigative journalists about Uber and the way Uber developed its business model around the world, circumventing laws, regulations, also the way it lobbied governments in Europe, here in North America. There is a Quebec angle also to this story, but a lot of troubling stories coming out of this massive report. It was based on leaked documents, tens of thousands of emails. To make sense of all of this and what it means, I'm happy to be joined by Katie Wells, a postdoctoral researcher at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., who has published papers about Uber called The Uber Workplace in D.C., and she joins us now. Thank you so much for being on the program.
Thanks, David, for having me.
So you were actually quoted in the piece from CBC News last weekend. And so what is your reaction to all these different revelations? And maybe you can give some examples to us of what struck you as most troubling.
Yeah, I mean, it is a troubling story. It shows in many ways how Uber's worldwide successes are really an impressive political feat, right? What they have really, sort of innovated is the way in which they've lobbied. Like the technology, sure, that's, a challenge to the taxi industry and transportation, but they have really, been the steadfast lobbying machine. And many of us who've been following them for the last decade have seen that, and I've tracked that in D.C. But what's, so, sort of breathtaking about this leak that Uber filed is that it shows how much that continued to happen outside of North America. Yeah. And it continued as late as 2017. And so looking at all this tedious work, they didn't just win. They didn't just become a common sense solution for cities struggling with questions about transportation. They actually really fought and worked for it, but they did it in these insidious ways, in these worrying ways.
So what was the MO? I mean, I saw when I read, for example, the way they operated in France and in the U.S. and in Canada, seems to be always the same MO.
Yeah. Yeah, and they test. So what we found is that they really took the model and they had honed it in D.C. It was like batting practice.
So what was
in
it?
the U.S.?
Explain
the idea
that.
is they come in, they fight regulators and regulation, and they basically make an argument to say, if you believe in innovation, you're definitely against regulation. That regulation and the state and rulemaking as a collective enterprise is kind of antiquated. Let's move beyond that. And they sort of say, don't worry, we'll take care of everything. Oh, you want, disabled rider access? Well, we'll try to make that happen, but you don't need to legislate us, or regulate it.
I remember here in Montreal, I was in government. I was in the Quebec government. I was a minister, but I wasn't responsible for taxis. But I remember Uber just showed up and didn't ask for any type of meetings, or they just showed up and started operating, and then we had to catch up, and they did lobby. There was, of course, a lot of interactions, but it's like they just started, and it's not the usual way businesses implant in a jurisdiction. Usually there are meetings, they sit down and we talk. No, they just started, and we had to just deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, it was in many ways a genius enterprise, right? It was that whole don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. And the thing is, what's terrifying is it worked, right? It worked in all these jurisdictions. I mean, there was a great report, the National Employment Law Project, NELP in the U.S. They found in 1 year alone, in 2016, that Uber and Lyft together had more lobbyists than Amazon, Microsoft, and Walmart combined.
Wow.
I mean, it's stunning, right?
Right. No, it's fascinating.
So this trove of files really is sort of helping us see that tedious work involved in them sort of expanding and selling their worldview.
So you've been studying this very closely for years. So tell me.
Very depressing, David.
Yeah. But tell me, how do we react? What are the lessons that we need to learn and implement What do
Yeah.
governments have to do? And I'm not necessarily just targeting Uber, but what did we miss?
Yes. So here's the thing, right? I think what we found is that it's not just that Uber came in and lobbied all these places and won. It's also that cities and policymakers understandably look to Uber as a solution. They have been struggling with deep-seated problems of urban, like how do you make a city work well, right?
Right.
And so it's understandable that they turn to Uber as sort of a cheap solution. The mandate now, what I would say to policymakers now is to say, wait a second, you have the opportunity to change the story. This does not need to be a done deal. There are plenty of policy variations on the question of Uber, as well as all of these new things like Uber Eats and DoorDash or, Grubhub. And we have an opportunity to sort of like shift the balance of power, I would say, and retake that, mandate of trying to make a democratic society.
So it's more about regulation, because what's scary right now when you name all these services that are out there is that they come in with, very attractive offers, promises, and they kill the market or they kill competition. And then we're stuck with only dealing with them, and then they start raising prices. So, and we have no data to say, well, what are the environmental impacts of people getting a candy bar delivered in a car? What's the congestion impact? Like the world is maybe on fire, so maybe the idea of increasing delivery services, could raise some concerns. And now look. It is totally possible that these delivery and even ride-hail services are making the world better. But I'm an empiricist, and the workers that we've followed, we followed 40 Uber drivers for 5 years. I mean, it just isn't. The data isn't there yet. And so you're still studying this, obviously.
Yeah,
you're following this very carefully.
Look, these companies have the data. We would love them to release it. Show us that this is actually making the world, these cities, better, right?
Right.
But until they do that, there will be these renegade, researchers that will try to piece together the story from outside of the company, offices.
Well, that's all the time I have, but this is fascinating. I really appreciate you coming on today, and I congratulate you on your great work on this. Very, very interesting.
It's great to talk with you, David.